So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is actually one I nearly forgot about because it was sent to me right near my final university deadline, but I'm glad that the player who sent it to me reminded me of it, because here we have an Elven Settlement, and while this isn't exactly the same, this is going to be quite reminiscent of the Elven Settlements that you're going to be seeing in 0.97, so it's a pretty good little pseudo sneak peek, I suppose, of what we're going to be seeing in the future. You can obviously see that this in particular is pretty decent. So you've got these sort of like high walkways that the archers and ranged units can go on, which I'm very interested to see how this will work out for the defenders in this particular battle. The outer walls, however, are just standard wooden palisades, so this is actually good as well because it means that the archers can sort of stand on these sort of walkways up here. And one of the main problems with putting your archers up on the outer walls like this is 9 times out of 10 a catapult is just going to force them off anyway. Whereas that's not going to be the case up here, so I'm very interested to see how this match will unfold. We'll go through the attackers first of all, and then we'll go through what the defenders have. So first of all, the first attacking army, we have Aroma the Great playing as Isengard. So some Uruk-hai Reavers here pushing up a siege tower to engage with the outer palisade, as are some Dunland veterans over here. So of course the Dunland veterans with those one-handed axes have got a higher attack value. They're not AP, but they do still have a higher attack value than the sword and shield Uruk-hai Raiders. And also, all the Dunland units do have an anti-cavalry bonus. Some, of course, is more effective than others. The clansmen, because they wield spears, although they do have shields as well. They're very good against cavalry, but the Dunland veterans, they will still take obviously horrendous damage if they get charged. But even so, a little anti-cavalry bonus is still enough to give a little bit of pause, perhaps, for any opponents that come into melee contact with. Some Uruk-hai Reavers over here as well, pushing up a ram. We've got some more Dunland veterans pushing up this siege tower over here, and then these final two siege towers being manned by a couple of units of upgraded Uruk-hai infantry, so we'll see how well they are going to be able to do in this fight. Uruk-hai crossbows as well, obviously a very necessary part of most Isengard compositions because it gives them a lot of stopping power, a lot of damage, very much a central pillar to what makes Isengard so strong, as is this unit over here, of course, the Pikemen. Very solid pikemen indeed, good armour, good stats overall for pikemen as well. They'll be able to hold their phalanx a little bit better than some of the cheaper units, and overall they'll be able to do damage a little bit more quickly than some of the cheaper units as well. Back here, we of course have an Isengard Ballista. In 0.96.1 it's certainly the most potent piece of siege equipment in the game. That might not be the case in 0.97 because there's a few new siege equipment pieces being added. We also have some Nazkai back here, some more Uruk-hai infantry, and then finally another ram being pushed by some Snaga skirmishers, weirdly enough. Then, the army here in the south, we have, as I'm trying to get something out of my eye, we have Angmar. So, they are going to be played by Katunka the Easterling, and he's got some Barrow-wights, of course, pushing up the ram, obviously very, very potent in 0.96, just because of how tough they are to kill. Then we have some Gundabad Guard, which they're actually going to be better in 0.97, because spears in general are going to be made a little bit more potent. But in this patch, they're still decent at staying alive. They're still difficult to break down quickly, but overall the Guardians of Khan Doom, which we can see back here with the without the armor upgrade this time, so just the rusted armor, they are generally speaking the more efficient unit to use, in particular in a siege, because you're less likely to come into contact with a lot of cavalry. Witch-Round Pikemen without the armor upgrade is very similar actually in terms of quality to the Uruk-hai pikes. The main difference is Angmar can generally bring less pikes than Isengard, but even so it's still a very important pillar to their army a lot of the time. Here we can see some Blackwatch Legion as well, obviously. The Great Shield units, their popularity is mixed, shall we say. People think differently about them, but they are obviously, the main use of them is to push through enemy lines, which could be very, very important in this battle in particular. Also their shields, because those archers up on those elven walkways are going to be very difficult to get to, so those shields could actually absorb a decent amount of damage. And then back here we've got I think just one unit actually of Angmar Halberds, in addition to of course the mighty Witch-Round Blackguard. And then over here we have the Trolls of Angmar, obviously again very, very durable with the heavy armour and shields that they wield. And then finally the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. So it's 3 Orc factions bearing down on this Elven Settlement. It is going to be a good versus evil battle today. We have Vayner, Doge of Venice. So we have the White Uruk Fearmongers. The armour piercing will certainly be useful against the human faction, which is helping the elves defend their settlement here. Not so much against the Elven faction, but even so, they're still a very potent unit all around, a very useful tool for the Misty Mountains. Of course, we have some heavy Goblin crossmen as well. Very much like the Isengard crossbows, the Misty Mountain crossbows are often a very important part of their roster, just because the stopping power crossbows offer the Orc factions in particular. It's very important to how they do their business. Some Black Uruks of the Mountain, so some heavy Orc swordsmen, like I said. Similar to the Veriag swordsmen in the sense that they aren't necessarily the best heavy swordsmen in the game, but they do have a lot of numbers in their unit. and they are a little bit more well suited for going up against factions like the Elves, just because their skill is not quite so far in the toilet like some of the low tier Goblin units. Heavy Goblin Spears, again the AP will be useful against the Human faction in particular. Elven faction again slightly less so, even though the Heavy Goblin Spears are very good in 0.96. There's a couple of units of Snarker Skirmishers here. Javelins are always going to be useful if you can get them into a good firing position. Bulk Champions here. Good to have at least some cavalry roaming around, so they could be used offensively or defensively for the attackers here. Some Snow Trolls as well, very fast moving trolls across the battlefield, and also some more Heavy Goblin Spears. So now, the moment everyone's been waiting for, I'm sure, we'll have a look at the defenders, which is going to, well, they're going to be made up of Lango, playing as Lyndon, who is the one who sent me the replay, and Tundra's Fox, who's going to be playing as Dale. So we've got some Harlindon Guard here on the outer palisade, ready to receive the assault from the Misty Mountains. They're going to be backed up by some Greenwood Lumbermen, which against Orc factions like this, a unit of cheap axes, maybe not the worst thing. They will still fall apart relatively quickly because light armour, low melee skill, but decent damage, especially when they're going to be backed up by some Lyndon troops. The FORLINDON Marines here, obviously spear, javelin hybrids. We have some Harlindon infantry as well, going to be very, very efficient against most of the Orc infantry coming at it. This is also going to be a very useful unit for the defenders throughout the battle, I feel. The Barding Herd, very, very strong unit of Halberds because they are very tanky. They have that shield value, they have the heavy lamellar armour, and also, of course, the armour-piercing phalanx that a halberdier is known for. Very, very good unit all around this Barding Herd. Very solid centre to the Dalian line. We also have some Dalian marksmen here who actually already have their axes and shields out, but I'm sure that will change. They were just here placing their stakes in front to make the Bolg Champion's job a little bit harder. Some Harlindon infantry also over here, and some more Harlindon guards, so more of a range threat, but also the biggest range threat on the field will be the Wardens of Alos Tyrian, because even if the Athala Rangers are here, the Wardens of Alos Tyrian have got 6 missile damage to the Athala Rangers 5, but even so, both units, I'm sure, will be absolutely devastating if used correctly. Some Mithlon Pikemen over here in the town centre, as well as 2 units of the Noldorin Guard. Some FORLINDON Pikemen, we actually have a High Elven Ballista as well, and some more Mithlon Pikemen. Just having a cursory glance around these upper walkways here, so we can see the Lake Town Bowmen have taken up position. We have some Lake Town River Patrol as well. Pretty much on every walkway we see archers, which is a very wise move, because I don't think the attackers are going to be able to easily get to these units at all. And both Dale and Lyndon have both got some very potent ranged units indeed. Dalian Royal Guard up here. Bardian Marksmen without the armour upgrade, 2 units of them. We have, oh boy, interesting camera glitching there. Mithlon Marines, obviously good at range and in melee. Some Earls of Askaroth combined with some Barding Herd, a very solid Dale front line indeed. Harlindon Infantry, more Mithlon Marines over here. Harlindon Infantry here, and looks like, yep, some more Greenwood Lumbermen. Over here we have some more FORLINDON Archers, we have some Lake Town Infantry, some FORLINDON Archers again. And then over here we can see that there are some more ranged units, so some Lake Town River Patrol. They could rain down hell onto the streets below with their javelins, armour piercing of course. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers as well, armour piercing missiles, very, very deadly potentially. Although they're actually facing the angle where there is no army approaching from. We have some more Dalian marksmen up here, and then finally, of course, we have the Morroquendi bows, the Elven Archer that Dale have. So I think actually all of the Dalian Archers have taken up position up on these walkways. I love these walkways, it's a really, really cool feature. But without further ado, let's begin. So I'm really interested to see how this works, because of course this is a real boon for the ranged units of the defenders, being able to use these walkways to sort of rain down their ammunition from on high. And it essentially acts like walls, only they're not going to be quite so devastated by siege equipment. Now I say that, but the Isengard Ballista is very accurate and very deadly, so it could still get some good shots off here, but I'm not sure how these walkways actually work mechanically, but I guess we will find out. But immediately, of course, these Lake Town Bowmen that are up on the wooden palisade are going to retreat off of it, because if they stay there, the Isengard Ballista is going to tear them to pieces. Over here, some Barding Herd and some Earls of Askaroth as well. Pretty much the... if you're willing to invest a huge amount in your front line, there goes the wall, the Isengard Ballista cleaving through the wood. But if you're willing to put in most of your money into your front line, then Barding Herd and Earls of Askaroth is probably what you're going to be using as Dale. A very strong unit of line infantry, and a very strong unit of halberdiers. As the wall crumbles, unsurprisingly. Interesting to see a wooden palisade. You don't get to see a lot of these in Reforged. Obviously they were more of a factor in low tier settlements in Medieval 2, standard Medieval 2, but good to see them here. It's always good to see more variety. Well, these Dalian marksmen also getting into position as the Misty Mountains. See the dust being kicked up by the army as they move around. It looks like they're actually going to move around to where Angmar are at, which is an interesting move indeed. But Angmar are shuffling their way forwards as the outer towers fire away. So this is, at least the outer walls are based on a settlement from Standard Medieval 2, so the defenders also have the added bonus of having some defensive towers doing a bit of damage as well, although most of them are actually hitting the Barrow Wights, which the Barrow Wights would probably be able to absorb this sort of punishment relatively easily. Although I say that, they are so slow that they might actually take a few losses from the arrow towers as they continue to pepper the Barrow Wights on the advance. Meanwhile, I wonder, I mean, this is the gatehouse, so the ballista is not actually going to do any damage to that. Anything that's marked as a building, it won't do damage to. Walls, however, will crumple, as well as towers. Although it looks as though Isengard is going to be more interested in poking a bunch of holes in the outer palisade, which is understandable, although they may not need to do that quite as much over on this side just because they have so many siege towers available to them. And ultimately, the main facet of this defence, these walkways with the archers on it, are going to be a factor regardless of how the attackers decide to approach this, whether they knock a whole bunch of holes in the outer walls and advance in on the low ground, or whether they try to take the outer palisades by using siege towers and ladders. Regardless of which they choose, or how much of each they decide to engage in, they're still going to have to deal with the ranged threats further in from the settlement. I do like this settlement though. I will be really interested to see how well the defenders can utilise their ranged units. While the Barrow Wights, they still haven't taken any losses, so it does go to show how tanky the Barrow Wights are as these towers continue to pepper them. But the hit points may very well be being shaved off here, which is good news for the defenders nonetheless. I'm actually surprised the ram hasn't been destroyed yet, because quite often these arrow towers can set rams on fire, and seeing as how slow the Barrow Wights are, I am rather surprised that the ram has not perished yet, which would have been big annoyance for the attackers.
The enemy are battering down the gates.
Well, Isengard, there's actually some Barrow Wights from Angmar coming across to assist Isengard as well, so it does look as though the attacks are going to mostly be coming from two sides here. Which honestly, if you're the defenders, you want the attackers to come from as few angles as possible. If you can bottle their attack up, that's exactly what you want, because generally speaking you're going to have the quality advantages, and that's certainly true in this fight. Both Dale and Lyndon have got a lot of their very strong units on display.
The enemy's ram has breached the gates.
There goes the gates. The gates are also quite small on these palisades, so the attackers are going to have to go through a very narrow area. Will the Barrow Wights immediately advance in all on their lonesome? They're still taking damage from those towers. But still, you can see that the example of the low mass of the Barrow Wights as well. They're sent flying every time they're hit, but the ultimate punching bags, they just keep chugging away. And they are going to advance in all on their own. So the Barding Herd braced and ready to receive the advance. And also there is the immediate backup of the Earls of Esgaroth available as well, should Dale need to call upon them. There's also some Elven infantry nearby as well. So the first melee engagement slowly but surely is happening as the Barrow Wights shuffle their way into the waiting Dalian phalanx, and immediately using those Bardishes to cleave into the top of the Barrow Wights, but still no kills as of yet, but that will rapidly change, especially seeing as all of the arrow damage that has already been done. Isengard meanwhile still pretty static, but I think they're still trying to poke holes in the wall. Having said that, well, they're actually doing damage to the High Elven Ballista just in behind, but this is actually not terrible news for the defenders, because at the very least it's forcing the attackers to use their Isengard Ballista ammunition on things other than their units, because the Isengard Ballista can be so devastating that you really don't want them to be using it on your defensive lines. Meanwhile over here, a couple of the Barrow Wights have now fallen away. Barding Herd holding firm. Barrow Wights were doing their sort of glitchy movement then, but so far the Barrow Wights, yeah, there they go again. Haven't really managed to achieve too much of anything just yet though, but they are going to receive some backup now from some Snaga Stalkers and from some Gundabad Guard. And the towers are still very much in effect, so Angmar are going to be taking some losses as this continues. The Dalian marksmen over here on the walls. Although having a look at Angmar, they don't actually have any siege towers. And the Misty Mountains army has also left behind all of their siege towers as well, so yeah, the archers over on this side are going to be completely safe to remain on the palisade actually, which is good news for them. Meanwhile, this Barding Herd unit is starting to struggle a little bit. Their formation has been buckled. They are going to need some support. The Greenwood Lumbermen are going to get into melee with them. They maybe would have been hoping for a unit of slightly higher quality coming in to support them, but it's better than nothing. And the Barrow Wights are starting to take losses slowly but surely. I mean, the Gundabad Guard should be doing fairly poorly against the Barding Herd, but the fact that Barding Herd's formation has been really forced aside by the numbers coming through the gates of Angmar. Greenwood Lumbermen are in there now, but the Barrow Wights are going to make sure that this attack continues for quite some time. The FORLINDON Marines are going to get into position, and they will have a pretty good angle to shoot into. You can see here the Snaga Stalkers' victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. You know, things are going wrong when the Snaga are gaining the upper hand in melee, but you can see there that as soon as the Phalanx has buckled, the Barding Herd are immediately starting to struggle. And that was the entire purpose between bringing forward a unit of high mass spears like the Gundabad Guard. Now the Barrow Wights are making a real mess of this defence. And the Earls of Esgaroth and the Greenwood Lumbermen, as well as some Elven infantry in the background, are now getting into melee, I should say. But it might be too little too late. If Angmar decide to come forward in force, this could be difficult to defend, but Angmar's reinforcements are a little bit too far away, and now the support of those FORLINDON Marines, as well as the Dalian marksmen up on the walls, they're in very good positions to fire into this assault, and this should start to break up the attack. I mean, the Gundabad Guard and the Snaga Stalkers are going to die in droves. The Barrow Wights will remain alive for the time being, but even the Barrow Wights will start to fall away pretty rapidly with a couple of units of Harland and infantry supporting the Dalians here. Meanwhile, you can see that the Barrow Wights are slowly shifting forwards as well. As you see that several of these towers have also been destroyed, so that's what the Isengard Ballista has turned its attention on. Must have used up a fair chunk of its ammunition at this point. You can see the Uruk-hai Reavers also coming forward. They will take damage on the approach from the one remaining tower that is still firing, just because they are certainly not tanks of the sort that the Barrow Wights are. Meanwhile, speaking of the Barrow Wights, they're still fighting hard, but they're going to need some more assistance here if they're going to make this ground that they've taken stick. You can see that there is another unit of Barrow Wights actually on the approach as well. I can't help but feel like some trolls would be very, very useful in this particular situation. They would really start to panic the defensive position, as well as a unit of supporting infantry as well. I mean, there's another unit of Gundabad Guard on the way forward, which is better than nothing, I suppose. You can see back here one of the Earls of Esgaroth duelling with one of the Barrow Wights that managed to leak through the lines. That Barrow Wight actually getting shanked in the back and the front. There are the trolls, so they did come forward. It's almost like he heard me. So the Trolls of Angmar are now getting involved with this melee fight. Now, they don't want to stick around too long in the very centre of this defensive blob, but this is still going to be enough to do a fair amount of damage. In fact, you can see the Trolls are actually being shifted over to attack the archers that are up on the walls. Without the use of any siege towers and ladders over here, the Trolls are going to be able to very easily carve their way through Dalian marksmen, which is going to take away one of the ranged threats that they're having to face as they move forwards. Having said that, the Barrow Wights, I mean, these Barrow Wights are starting to take losses now, 117 left. There's the more Gundabad Guard forcing their way in as well. The Gundabad Guard are very good, like most heavy spears like this, at pushing their way through defensive positions, but unfortunately they're certainly not going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Earls of Esgaroth in melee. But I couldn't help but notice that we are starting to see arrow fire from these walkways up here. The Dalian Royal Guard shooting through the trees and past the buildings into the attackers as they move through the gate. They've got a perfect shot in there as well. If that was a unit of Athala Rangers, that would have been absolutely brutal, but the Dalian Royal Guard is still a very strong arch unit nonetheless. The Earls of Esgaroth. The problem they may run into here is more a question of numbers, especially with another unit of Barrow Wights lumbering their way forward. Isengard destroying the gate on the other side as well. Arrows starting to rain down on their position too. There's actually some Noldering Guard over here, and I'm interested to see where these Trolls are going. If they go too far, there's some Harland Guard. I mean, the Trolls, to be fair, there's nothing over here that will give them too much pause in melee, to be honest, so they may as well keep going. The real prize would be the Wardens of Alos Tyrion if they can get into them. If they can kill the Wardens of Alos Tyrion, that's a huge huge factor in the battle taken care of already. Goblin infantry marching their way forward, although they won't be able to get in without any sort of ladder or siege equipment. Eldering Guard moving forwards. The Harlingen Guard are going to retreat down off the wall, but that will leave the door open potentially for the trolls to try and rush down the Wardens of Elos Tyrian. The Eldering Guard, however, will be able to stand toe-to-toe with the Trolls of Angmar, especially with a bit of support from the armour piercing of the Greenwood Lumbermen. Meanwhile, a couple of the Trolls have been left behind in this blob over here, but with the addition of some of the Linden Pikemen, the defence over here is now looking far more solid. No, it was looking a little bit chaotic. That initial unit of Barding Herd has been swallowed whole by the Barrow-wights. However, again, with a bit of range support, the towers still firing in. This defence looks to be under control once more. It's going to take a lot to get rid of the Barrow-wights. That's body-piercing projectiles, so that must be the Wardens of Elos Tyrian. Indeed it is, firing into this blob over here. But the Earls of Esgaroth, combined with the Linden forces, are now holding on. There's actually still a few Barding Herd left alive, but not too many. Harlingen infantry are also ready to charge in should they be needed. Meanwhile, this unit of Barrow-wights over here has come in, but it's on its own again. I mean, the Barrow-wights are at their most potent when you commit them when they have a lot of support, because then they're able to take the damage in place of other units that they're fighting alongside. They're the ultimate meat shields in melee. But when they're on their own, they will still do damage, and they are still difficult to get rid of, but they're not really doing it in aid of anything over here. Like, the defenders will be very pleased that the Barrow-wights are being committed in this manner, because it allows them to focus them down and try to kill them off as quickly as they possibly can, and then they can deal with the Isengard forces separately. Again, a combination of Barding Herd and Harlingen infantry fighting. The Barrow-wights still, victory seems certain for them, because they're a very potent unit, of course. There's a lot more units over here for the defenders that they can call upon should they need to. The Uruk-hai Reavers, I don't know what happened to them. Did they rout, or did they just get outright killed? I don't think so. That's not enough corpses from a very numerous Orc unit. Meanwhile, the Dunman veterans, they seem to have taken a few losses on the approach as well. They are going to get their siege tower into place, so Isengard are now going to start mounting the walls with a few units of infantry. Give the defenders something to think about. But the Harlingen infantry are right here, and of course the Harlingen infantry are far stronger than Dunman veterans. They should be very easily able to counter that. The problem that the attackers are having over here is that they're only really able to force their way through the gate from an Angmar perspective, but I can't help but notice. You can see over here that the Eldering Guard are facing off against the Trolls of Angmar with the support of the Greenwood Lumbermen, and even, you know, the Harlingen Guard in melee as well. The Trolls of Angmar will start to fall away, but it is worth saying that the forces of the Misty Mountains have now set up their ladders onto the outer palisades, and Goblin infantry starting to spread onto the outer walls. And actually there's nothing really left over here to counteract this, so the Trolls will get some support. Again, it's only Goblin infantry, they're already shaken as well, they're taking range damage, but you can see over here that the Angmar player, Katunka, is absolutely doing the right thing by trying to force his Trolls into the ranges, because these Trolls are dead. Like, they're not going to escape with their lives now. But if they can kill off a good chunk of these Wardens of Elos Tyrian, it's a very worthwhile sacrifice indeed, because we all know how powerful rangers can be. Meanwhile, the Dalian marksmen trying to shoot into the Goblin infantry and trying to break it to try and ensure that these Trolls don't have any form of support whatsoever. Although with the ladders set up, the Misty Mountains will be able to get some support in regardless, and also another ladder is being brought forward by an altogether more serious unit, the Black Uruks of the Mountains. They will be able to very easily deal actually with the Greenwood Lumberman. Less so with a unit of Eldering Guard. Eldering Guard is still looking very healthy as well, they haven't lost too many men. Meanwhile the Trolls, there's only 5 of them left. The Wardens of Elos Tyrian pulling through their own men, so the Dalian marksmen and the Harlingen Guard blocking the advance of the Trolls. Harlingen Guard are of course spearmen though, so they're not the most damaging. Not going to find it easy to take down those Trolls at all. Meanwhile, another unit of Barding Herd has come forward to defend this gate. And it looks as though, yeah, the Angmar Halberds have moved forward, so that's a unit that has a phalanx of its own. Armour piercing would be useful against the Dalian forces, but unfortunately for them, the Barding Herd is by far the stronger halberdier. And of course, Linden don't really care too much about armour piercing. This, however, is going to be something which the defenders are going to need to respond to in some manner. The Blackwatch Legion are moving forward, and they're going to try and push right through the Elven Pikes, which is absolutely the right thing to do. The last thing you want is to just be at the mercy of Linden's Pikemen for an extended period of time. We all know how effective Elven Pikemen can be, and a unit of Guardians of Khan Doom are also going to force their way forwards. You can see here that the Wardens of Elos Tyrian firing into that blob, but it's firing into the front of Blackwatch Legion, and the Blackwatch Legion, needless to say, you only have to look at them to realise that they have an enormous shield value. They also have good armour as well, so from the front, even a unit of rangers like the Wards of Alos Tyrion are not going to do a huge amount of damage, and still, the Angmar player is very keen on killing off those Wards of Alos Tyrion, and rightly so. Meanwhile, these trolls are still alive. Harlindon Guard really struggling to bring down the last few trolls, the Greenwood Lumbermen coming forward with their axes to try and lend a hand. But now the Black Uruks of the mountains also climbing onto the walls, and this is the moment where, as the defenders, you start to worry a little bit, because you're having to defend multiple angles and you're not really managing to hold on to any of them. Snow trolls are also over the walls, so another unit of trolls. I mean, it might be time now for the defenders to think about pulling back to a more manageable position, because as it stands, the trolls are really causing chaos in their defence, and they're now being backed up properly. Black Uruks of the mountains are a serious unit to back them up with. The Wardens of Alos Tyrion are also kind of trapped over here now.
Repel the attackers. Give them steel.
Now, the thing they do have in their favour, of course, are these archer positions over here. So up on these walkways, the archers will be able to give some overwatch fire, some support. Going to be very good, of course, at firing into the Black Uruks of the mountains and unshielded units such as them. Meanwhile, up here on this wall, you can see, of course, the Dunland veterans. They tried to make some progress, but it was always going to be very, very difficult for them against the Harlindon infantry, and they've, of course, been stopped dead in their tracks. Isengard, in general, seem to be taking their time a lot more than their allies. I mean, if Isengard came forward in serious numbers, the defenders would probably be really starting to panic here, because they'd be being attacked on all fronts with a lot of manpower. But as it stands over here, the defenders are keeping this situation under control. I mean, the Isengard ballista crew are just being thrown under the bus again. This unit is not going to do much of anything in melee just on its own. If you commit it with something else, at the very least, it'll be able to take some damage for another unit. As it stands, they're not going to kill any Barding Herd. The Barding Herd are going to rip them to pieces. FORLINDON archers up on the walls. Some Snaga skirmishers trying to do some damage, throw their javelins over the walls. But it's not the easiest shot they've got here. Behind the battlements of the palisade wall, those Harlindon infantrymen will not be too worried. There actually is some Isengard forces over here, so Isengard too have sort of shifted over some forces to help out Angmar. But unfortunately for them, they're immediately being mobbed by Mythlond Marines and Harlindon infantry, so that's not great for them, being overwhelmed. But Angmar still slowly but surely pushing this defence back, although you can see here the Dalian Roar Guard, who were up on the walkways previously firing into this position, have now come down out of ammunition, pulling out their long swords and getting involved in the melee fight. There's a lot of Angmar pikemen in here though, getting their pikes down. The other unit of Blackwatch Legion also pushing their way through, another unit of Uruk-hai infantry, so the attackers fancy their chances of getting through this position, and it's only one more unit of FORLINDON pikemen that have been committed as well. They're going to need more support here, I think, the defenders, if they're going to hold that position up. Meanwhile, you can see here that the Wardens of Alos Tyrion still attempting to be focused down, but I think this is the one remaining snow troll left, is it not? I think it is. Yep, it is. Only one snow troll remaining, so they were focused down very efficiently. The Noldorin Guard also coming to the aid of the Wardens of Alos Tyrion, but it's not as if the attacks have got nothing to show for this assault. They've caused chaos in the defensive ranks, and also the Wardens of Alos Tyrion are pretty depleted at this point. The Greenwood Lumbermen are also shaken, being attacked by the Black Uruks of the mountains over here. A very scary Orc infantry unit indeed. But they're about to be supported actually by the Noldorin Guard, but in turn the Orcs are about to be supported by one of the most deadly units they have at their disposal, the Blackback Mountain Berserkers. Even the Noldorin Guard will not enjoy being in melee with them. There are some more FORLINDON pikemen on the way over here as well, so the defenders are keen on defending the outer streets, which is good. They're sticking to their guns here, but it's over here where I would be most concerned for the defenders, because the attackers are still making progress over here. However, having said that, Angmar don't have a huge amount of forces left, although there are Misty Mountains units over here as well, which is the problem. They've sort of consolidated their strength over here a little bit. Meanwhile, Mythlon Marines getting up onto these walls, doing damage to the Uruk-hai infantry, and of course a factor which is ever present in this battle is the fact that the archers were up on these walkways doing damage. So ordinarily a unit of upgraded Uruk-hai infantry would probably beat Mythlon Marines in melee. After all, being a sort of makeshift melee unit comes second for a Mythlon Marine. Being a javelin man is their first priority. But with support from these firing positions over here, that completely changes the outlook of the fight. Meanwhile, Isengard still haven't come to support these Barrow-wights. These Barrow-wights are still giving it their all. If they had some support from Uruk-hai infantry and Reavers, they could be making some genuine progress over on this side as well, but as it is, unfortunately they're not really able to make too much in the way of progress here. The Barding Herd and the Harland infantry have continued to hold them at bay. And at this point the Barrow-wights, exhausted, they're still eager, but their manpower is slowly starting to decrease. There's a few Dunland veterans still up on that wall. I mean, technically victorious, they've taken the walls. If those Harland infantry wanted to turn around and exterminate them, they could, but still, the moral victory for the Dunland veterans. Forward-coming unit of Uruk-hai archers, presumably out of ammunition, just trying to keep this manpower on the front line going, because the defenders, they've committed forward a lot more men to this front line, and now they're starting to hold again, because you can see the pikes, but also a unit of Earls of Escaroth coming to help hold down the front line, the heavily armoured Dalian infantrymen. The Dalian Royal Guard have retreated from the front line. They took a lot of damage holding things together while the reinforcements got into position, but they did, and the defenders have managed to keep things under control for the time being. Over here, though, less good news for the defenders. I mean, the Warns of Alos Tyrian are almost completely dead, although they have managed to get this very nice engagement for them off. As long as the Warns of Alos Tyrian remain out of melee, you can see the pikes have sort of trapped the Blackback Mountain Berserkers against the wall, and the Rangers are shooting right down the lines. Killing off the Blackback Mountain Berserkers would be a huge win for the defenders. FORLINDON Pikemen continuing to hold them in place. That's one of the best uses of pikes, of course, even though the FORLINDON Pikemen are, of course, far weaker than the Blackback Mountain Berserkers. That phalanx means they will be held in place for a long time. Fighting pikes from the front, not a grand idea. Meanwhile, the Noldering Guard, of course, far stronger than the Black Uruks of the mountains. Noldering Guard, of course, a fantastic unit. I really love the look of the Noldering Guard as well. The one unit in the Linden roster which is very heavily armoured, although I think the Blade Masters in .97 will also gain that distinction. Some Blackwatch Legion trying to come to the aid of the Black Uruks of the mountains. Still, the towers firing away. A unit of Heavy Goblin Spears getting ready to mount the walls as well. We'll see if the defensive manpower can continue to hold itself together. Still, those walkways proving to be a real asset here. Lake Town Bowmen getting into position. Maybe not the best archers, but with that firing position, it's great news for them, able to shoot into the top of this unit of Uruk-hai infantry. They're shaken as well. Some Heavy Goblin Spears moving into position, but a shower of javelins coming in there from the Lake Town River Patrol as they throw their jabs. Heavy Goblin Spears are shaken as well, so this is going to be a problem, of course, for the Orcs. Will their morale manage to hold together under all of this range fire? Well, there are some Uruk-hai Reavers over here, so it looks as though Isengard has primarily decided to come over here and try and focus on this defence over here. Again, I don't agree with that. I feel as though the attackers have played into the defenders' hands somewhat by focusing on very narrow points of engagement, and that might end up costing them the battle, honestly. If they had gone all in on three sides of the settlement, it would have been far more difficult for the defenders to hold with the numbers that they had. Barding Herd are shaken, not much of them left. Now the Barrow-wights are getting some support, but after they're heavily depleted, it's only a unit of Dunland veterans anyway. Some Snaga skirmishers also. At least it's better than nothing, but it might also be too little too late for making any genuine progress on this side. And this, of course, is the green light the defenders want to shift more of their manpower over here to help hold back the Orc and Uruk-hai tide, and Goblin. So yeah, the Heavy Goblin Spears, defeat seems certain for them, of course. The AP is so useful against most factions, but not against Linden. It will be useful against Dale, of course, but the one problem they have there is the fact there are Barding Herd in that formation as well as Pikes, so the Heavy Goblin Spears are going to really struggle to get into melee range to go about their work. Heavy Goblin Spears now mounting the walls, climbing up the ladders. But still, these Noldering Guard, they managed to essentially dumpster the Black Uruks of the mountains. There's not much left elsewhere. They're still fighting hard against the Heavy Goblin Spears. Having a look over here, so you have Lake Town Bowmen getting into position. There's actually a couple of Blackback Mountain Berserkers over here. There's only 7 of them. And is that all that's left of that unit? I think it might be. So the Blackback Mountain Berserkers were ripped to pieces by the Wardens of Alos Tyrian, but the Wardens of Alos Tyrian are also extremely depleted at this point. 7 Blackback Mountain Berserkers. It looks as though they're going to be dragged down by a cluster of Lake Town Bowmen. There's also some Lake Town River Patrol over here as well. What have we here? A very depleted unit of Noldering Guard, but they're going up against just a section of that unit of Heavy Goblin Spears. Heavy Goblin Spears taking some more damage. Meanwhile, still you can see up on these walkways the archer positions. Perfect really to shoot into the back of that formation as well. So yeah, it's been a very key factor in this battle so far, the fact that these bridges have played host to these archers. You know, Dale and Lyndon as well are two factions that have got access to some very good archers. So it's been really brutal for the attackers to try and get through here, but I like that. It makes sense as well for a defence. Like, if you're going to try and defend a town like this, it makes sense to have defences in place where you can sort of have your archers shoot from within the town. Heavy Goblin Spear's victory seems certain. I mean, you know, the attackers do still have manpower on their side, I suppose, but the longer this fight goes on, the more and more I'm coming down in favour of the defenders winning this. What have we got over here? Lake Town River Patrol. Certainly not the last word in terms of quality and melee, but don't necessarily need to be. There's not really much left attacking them from that side. Still, these Barrow Wights are fighting. The Dunland veterans just routed as soon as we got over here. Mithlon Marines pulling out their swords and shields in melee. Again, I don't think they're going to make too much progress either. The Barrow Wights standing firm, very, very tough to wear down. The Snaga skirmishers throwing their javelins in. There's a unit of Lake Town infantry over here as well, ready to come in reserve should they be needed, just to hold back any potential assault. There's a unit of Uruk-hai pikemen coming forward now. So Isengard could still make something happen over there. And the announcer is still not feeling too confident about the defenders' chances. I mean, we're past the halfway points. Having a look, the defenders are technically ahead by 6%, but of course in this sort of fight the attackers do tend to pull it back in the late game. Especially seeing as we are still yet to see the mighty Nazkai commit themselves to melee. The Earls of Esgaroth, Barding Herd and Harland Infantry trying their best to hold back this slew of orcs. Hang on a moment. What have we got up here? Very depleted unit of Uruk-hai Infantry. Coming back for another attempt at the Mithlon Marines, but the Elves will be able to hold very firm there. The banner of the White Hand will fall on that wall. Some Bardian marksmen coming forward. They're decent in melee, of course. When they pull out their swords and shields, they've got decent armour as well, so not the easiest unit to bring down. And another unit of Greenwood Lumbermen, so again, easy to kill. But the armour-piercing damage could be very useful against the vast majority of these orc forces. Just having more manpower on the front line is going to be very, very appreciated, I'm sure. Forward come the Uruk-hai pikemen through the gate, which could surround this defensive position over here, but you can see from further within the town the Morroquendi bows and the Lake Town bowmen really teeing off into the Uruk-hai pikemen. They were actually wavering for a second there. As soon as they got into the gate, they realised what they were walking into. And now also Harland Infantry and Lake Town River Patrol closing the jaws on them. Another siege tower, so the Snaga skirmishers. Another way up onto the walls. Yeah, those Uruk-hai pikemen, they're being devastated immediately. Yeah, those walkways are proving to be a very, very useful defensive feature in this settlement. As the defenders, one thing that you will always try to do is to use your ranged units to their maximum effectiveness, really bottle up the attackers and then shoot at them. And that's easier said than done with a lot of settlements, because you can't just put your men up on the outer walls and shoot into the attackers as they approach, because the walls 9 times out of 10 will be focused down by artillery. But here, far more difficult to do. It's a far bigger headache for the attackers as well, because there's no real avoiding it. They form a ring around the town centre, so regardless of where you attack from, really, you're going to have to deal with that. Lake Town River Patrol are of course terrible in melee, but just the fact that there's something here surrounding this Isengard force as they try to push through, and also holding them in place as those arrows shoot them in the back. That's all they're really here for. These Uruk-hai infantrymen have had their fangs blunted at this point. The Barding Herd, Bardian marksmen, Greenwood Lumbermen are coming forward. There's another unit of javelins on the way as well as some Mithlon pikemen. But it is looking more and more over here like finally this unit of Noldering Guard is going to be destroyed. There's only 12 of them left. And there's still plentiful goblins over here. Heavy goblin spears. Still some Warns of Elos Tyrion, but only 4 of them. They're certainly not going to be able to lay down the kind of DPS they used to be able to. Heavy goblin spears. Yeah, they're going to win over here eventually, the attackers, but it will cost them a great deal. I mean, they've lost both units of trolls over here, as well as a lot of decent units like Black Uruks of the Mountains. Snaga skirmishers. Good move to have them put the siege tower up onto this wall, because they've now managed to occupy this position and they're firing their javelins off into a big blob of defenders, so it really behooves the defenders at this point to shoot them, although they might be out of ammunition in a lot of their units at this point, which would be terrible news for them as the javelins continue to rain down into this position. Having said that, the defenders are giving as good as they get. Those Lake Town River Patrol focusing down the Witch Round Blackguard, another very strong unit, of course, that the attackers have at their disposal. The javelins honestly might be the defenders' best bet of dealing with them. The Bolgs champions are now in the settlement, so of course this is another thing the defenders are going to have to be very wary of. The Bolgs champions could just rear charge a big blob, and a hammer and anvil strike like that is going to be absolutely devastating. They should still have enough pikes and halberds to hold them off, although I'm not quite... I'm not sure about that now that I take another look. The attackers may very well be starting to pull this one back. The Morroquendi bows are over here, of course. Elven heavy archers. There's still Barrow-wights here. They've been involved in this engagement since the beginning. There's only 20 of them left, of course, which means they will almost certainly be killed very quickly in the next time they're in melee. Do Isengard really have anything to take advantage of what they have over here, though? The Bolgs champions might be the best thing for that, but where are the Bolgs champions? Oh no, terrible move. This could be a very key moment in this battle, because the Bolgs champions are going to charge in through here. This is the last thing they want to do. They want to go around to the back of the settlement and go through the roads to charge into the back of the town centre. If they go through here, there's pikes there, they'll get shredded. There's also javelins backing up said pikes. It'll be utter devastation, although I think the Bolgs champions are on their way over here now. Having said that, the Bolgs champions are taking damage. I can't help but wonder if the Blackshot Dragon Slayers are focusing them down. That wasn't a charge that the Bolgs champions got off, so once again they're just being caught in melee. I mean, against Lake Town Bowmen it's not really the biggest concern. They might be getting friendly fire here though, from the Snaga skirmishers. Not many Bolgs champions left at all, though at the very least their unit is very stretched. And you can see several of the Bolgs champions are still stuck in this engagement over here, which is the last place they want to be with Pikemen there. Those Bolgs champions could have been the thing which ended this battle, to be quite blunt. If they came around here to this position, I mean, there's really nothing before the archers. A charge from the Bolgs champions would wipe them out. And then into the back of the town centre, there'd be nothing they could do because there isn't many pikes left. So the Bolgs champions, I think, could have ended this fight. So it'll be interesting to see if the defenders can go on to pull this fight out of the bag. Because if they do, that'll be the reason why. Here are the Morroquendi bows still firing. The fact they still have ammunition is a huge deal as well. I mean, there's really not much left of this defence at this point. The Mithlon pikemen are being focused down by javelins. But the archers further in the settlement are also giving as good as they get, firing into the ranks of the attackers. Some Snaga skirmishers over here. A lot of Snaga skirmishers all around. You can tell the Isengard ones because they've got sort of the green skin tone. Still, those towers are firing away though, plugging away at the ranks of the attackers. Witch Round pikemen are heading over that way. Some Uruk-hai crossbows still alive. Some, yeah, the crossbows could be a real problem for the defenders as well. The attackers still have them in the back pocket after all. They're doing their best here, the defenders, but I feel as though this engagement over here, where the trolls sowed some chaos, really got in and amongst a lot of the defenders. Ranged units, archers, in particular their rangers, of course. That could yet prove to be a pretty decisive moment in this battle. One's Velostirians still trying to get as many kills on the heavy goblin spears as they can, but from the front, those shields should mitigate a decent amount of that damage. Heading back over here, there's actually still some Noldring Guards, and the Noldring Guard were victorious over there, which is incredible when you think about it. There's only 8 of them left, so how much are they well, 8 and 6. So how much are they really going to be able to affect the fight? Against low tier units, possibly a great deal. But against Witch Round Blackguard, wherever they may be, probably not so much. There's a lot of dead Lake Town River Patrol over here. It's just a very thin line at this point of River Patrol and Lake Town Bowmen, as well as a couple of Elven Pikes that are holding the line. It's not a huge force from the attackers, to be blunt, either, but it will still be able to force its way through there. The Dalian General still waiting in the wings. Still those Morroquendi bows shooting at the attacks as they move forward. Over here though, There's Witcher-Elm Blackguard backed up by Uruk-hai Pikemen. There's still a couple of Barrow-wights in there as well. Having said that, some FORLINDON archers are in and amongst the backlines, although considering the reinforcements that are on the way, Witcher-Elm Pikemen and Nazkai, this is certainly where the attackers are starting to focus now. Both of their really elite units that they've got left. A lot of their pikemen are coming down this way as well. Daily and marksmen up on the walkways. I mean, it is worth mentioning that, you know, the defenders do still have a lot of units that are up here, which if they still have ammunition, as the attackers move through, they'll be getting shot in the back by Blackshot Dragon Slayers, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do the damage as quickly as they need to be able to here. Also, one real problem, they've got Bardian Marksmen trying to hold back Witcher-Elm Blackguard. There come the black arrows from the Blackshot Dragon Slayers using their handheld wind lancers, and that is immediately able to do a decent amount of damage to them. So this is what the defenders are trying to do. They're again trying to use the walkways to their maximum effect, shooting these units in the back where the Blackguard's shields will not be coming into effect. FORLINDON archers shooting away. There goes the Linden General though, under a hail of Snaga skirmisher ammunition, but here comes more attackers from another angle. I just don't think the defenders have got the manpower left at this point to be able to hold back the attackers on all fronts. If it was just one street they were coming down, maybe. But the attackers, I think, have learnt their lesson after wasting those bold champions. They're going to attack from at least two angles at this point. Uruk-hai infantry coming in with the backup of some Snaga skirmishers. They're out of ammunition. A couple of Greenwood Lumbermen and Dalian Royal Guard are standing in the way. I don't know, I mean, the Dalian Royal Guard might be able to kill off this small force, but as soon as the next one arrives, it's going to be all over for them, I fear. Here comes a unit of heavy goblin spears. These Warns of Alosterion have been trying to poke them down as they've advanced around, but that is another angle that the defenders are going to have to try and hold. The Morroquendi bows, or as the unit of Dalian marksmen, I think they're out of ammunition. They're coming down here now. Those Blackshot Dragon Slayers still doing a lot of damage, and there goes the Angmar General. The Orcs are much more likely to feel the effects of a lost general than the Western Kingdoms of Men or the Elves, although I guess Dale more than Northern Kingdom of Men. Meanwhile, what's going on here? The Morroquendi bows at this point have turned around and are shooting into the heavy goblin spears. And at this point, the Dalian Royal Guard and the FORLINDON archers fighting side by side. I mean, there is still the ranged power that the defenders are using, but with the advance of the crossbow units, Snaga skirmishers, Uruk-hai crossbows getting into position now, I really can't see the defenders managing to pull this one out of the bag. I mean, maybe they will, but it's unlikely, I think. There's only so much ammo the Blackshot Dragon Slayers must have. I mean, they're doing the right thing now, once again focusing down the Nazkai. The Nazkai would just rip their way through Bardian and Marksmen in melee, of course. And then the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, as soon as the Nazkai are dead, I suppose they're a very potent unit in melee themselves. Heavy Goblin Spears defeat is a distinct possibility. I mean, I guess if it comes down to a pure melee fight at this point, I suppose the defenders could yet win this. The problem that they have is if the attackers are wise, they will absolutely not allow it to turn into a pure melee fight, because they still have these crossbowmen. Having said that, I don't really think they're using the crossbows all that wisely at the moment. What are they actually shooting? Are they shooting into the walkway itself? They are. However, this has, I think, much the same effect as the defensive wall, so some of these bolts will find their mark, but some of them won't. So it might actually be better for the defenders that the crossbows are trying to focus down their archers as it stands. Have the Blackshot Dragon Slayers run out of ammunition, because that might be the final nail in the coffin, because the Nazkai are not yet weak enough, to my mind, and they're just slicing their way through the Bardian Marksmen. Blackshot Dragon Slayers are moving. What have we got here? Yeah, I mean, this is certainly not wise. The Uruk-hai crossbows getting a little bit too close to the front line. The Snaga skirmishers routing, running for the hills. And the FORLINDON archers closing with the Uruk-hai crossbows in melee to prevent them from firing. If they can prevent all these crossbows from firing, the defenders may survive this yet. They still have those Dalian Royal Guard as well. Only 7 of them left, but this fight is really coming down to small margins. A huge cluster of Snaga skirmishers moving into place there as well. really not a lot of Bardian marksmen left alive, but they are fighting within the town centre, so they will fight to the death. And to the death it will have to be, because it's Nazkai that they're facing. There's the Dalian Royal Guard, who I think are going to try and hold back the Snaga skirmishers all on their lonesome, so the defenders are going to have to bring some of their units down from the walkways at this point, otherwise they are going to lose the town centre. Only 7 Dalian Royal Guard, but that's enough to cause the Snaga skirmishers to become shaken. There is King Brand himself, slicing his way through those units there. Blackshot Dragon Slayers, the balance of forces is evenly matched. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers and the Morroquendi bows together, pretty potent combination. But I think what they need to do is just mob the Nazkai at this point. Those Snaga skirmishers are really not enjoying being in melee with just those 6 Dalian Royal Guardsmen. Can the Blackshot Dragon Slayers turn this fight around? Percentages? Yeah, I mean, I think the defenders have just lost too much. They've only got 5% of their forces left. Attacks have got 14. The FORLINDON archers doing their best here in melee against the Uruk-hai crossbows, but a unit actually I didn't notice, the Goblin King bodyguard are here, so yeah, I think this is it for the defenders. They put on a valiant showing, but with a fresh unit of Goblin King bodyguard coming forward, cutting their way through the FORLINDON archers with the backup of some Snaga skirmishers, I think that's going to be it. It's going to be a close one though. And also, this is such a neat settlement as well. This is the sort of thing that we can expect a good deal more of in 0.97. Just not so much famous known settlements, but sort of regular Elven settlements and Dwarven settlements and such like this, each with their own distinct flavour. The Elven settlements in particular, I think WK has done a fantastic job on. Meanwhile, Witcher-Round Pikemen, still in decent numbers here, alongside the Uruk-hai Pikemen. The Dalian marksmen still have ammunition, actually, amusingly enough. What's going on here? Snaga skirmishers being chased down by the Morroquendi bows. And they're trying to ignore the Morroquendi bows, but that will result in their demise sooner rather than later. There's still a lot of arrows that are going into these pikemen here. But again, it's... What have we got back there as well? Yeah, heavy goblin crossmen. They've shifted themselves around to here as well. But the presence of the Goblin King bodyguard means that even if it comes down to a pure melee struggle at this point, the attackers simply have too much left for the defenders. So that bold move from Angmar and the Misty Mountains to just sort of force their trolls through, get in and amongst all of those ranged units. Maybe the defenders were a little bit slow on the uptake there, but it is obviously always quite difficult as the defenders when you're so severely outnumbered to pull a victory out of the bag. And they almost managed it. And to be fair, the attackers had their own problems to overcome in this fight as well. Like this sort of the inner walkways here, this sort of ring of walkways that are around the town centre. It's a pretty substantial challenge for an attacking force to overcome, because you're just going to have to accept the fact that you're going to take a ton of damage. We've got here Goblin King bodyguard Azog himself charging through. Uruk-hai crossbows trying to fire up into the Dalian marksman, but of course again, while it may look very open, based on what I saw earlier, I would assume that this is much like having your units on the outer walls, so it's almost like having battlements in front of them. Some shots will still land, but a lot will be blocked by the defensive structure. The Morroquendi bows still fighting hard against the Snaga skirmishers, padding their own kill counts yet further. The Goblin King bodyguard are now on the scene. Blackshot Dragon Slayers, they're going to fight to the death as well, with the support of their archers from on high. Blackshot Dragon Slayers are of course very strong in melee, which is one of the reasons why I wasn't keen to completely rule out the defenders until I saw the Goblin King bodyguard appear. But now, yeah, they're just going to be overwhelmed. I'm going to try and get into melee with these crossbows as well, but it's all going to be a bit too late for them. Over here, the Goblin King bodyguard finishing off the Morroquendi bows, saving the Snaga, because those Snaga would certainly have died to the Morroquendi bows if left to their own devices. Dalian marksmen. Now, finally, the attackers are going to be able to claim these walkways for themselves. Although they're leading the way with Snaga skirmishers, so the Dalian marksmen will probably be alright for the time being. But I think the Dalian marksmen aren't going to be the last ones left alive, because there's only one Blackshot Dragon Slayer left, and he is dead. So, the final battle taking place up here. Still going to be able to pad their own kill counts a little bit more, firing into those pikemen. Especially seeing as the ones leading the way are crossbowmen and Snaga skirmishers, so the Dalian marksmen won't die instantly, although they are already shaken. Still, let's have a look at the final percentages. So it is going to be, within 8%. A close fight to be sure, but I think the real MVP of this fight is the map, because just a little sneak preview of some of the creativity that you're going to be seeing in 0.97. Not only with sieges like this, but also with new terrain types for field battles, so more interesting field battles are going to be coming. And the maps are honestly going to be one of the best things about 0.97, alongside the new factions that obviously everyone's excited for, as well as the new additions to existing factions. But the maps will really help, and I'm really looking forward to showcasing more maps of this type going into 0.97. Still trying to shoot, get as many kills as they possibly can. I'm surprised they didn't just send up the Goblin King bodyguard to deal with them, because this fight probably... There they go, they routed. They have anything left? I guess they must. What's this? Oh, I see. There is another engagement happening over here, and it is King Brand, and he dies. Shanked by goblins. A 9% difference. Big thank you to Lango for reminding me of this one, because this one I would have completely forgotten about, honestly, because he sent it to me when I was right in the middle of doing my final work on my final year university project. But it was a fantastic fight. I really liked the map. I really liked the sort of sneak preview, as it were, for 0.97. And well played to all of them as well. I think, the attackers, if it were me, I still would have maybe gone for a bit more. I wouldn't have focused down individual sections of the wall quite so much. Spreading out the orcs around the wall would have yielded even better results, I think. And also the fight also could have been made more decisive in the orcs' favour if the Bolg's champions had been made to run around to the back of the town centre and do more damage by recharging the defences that were there. Because there were so few pikes at that point, they would have been able to do it without too many issues. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers would have killed them eventually, but a few charges would have been pretty lethal. But also well played to the defenders. I mean, they utilised the defences they had very well. I think, what lost them the fight ultimately was not reacting quickly enough to the trolls chewing through a whole bunch of their ranged units. If they have more ranged units in the town centre, personally, I think probably the better thing to do would just be to leave all their ranged units in the town centre and just rotate them out onto the walkways as and when needed. Because, as you saw here, the ones that they did leave on the outer walls were immediately charged down by the trolls, and that could have been the decisive moment in the battle, looking back. But what did the damage for the elves? Obviously the Wardens of Elos Tyrion getting over 400 kills, very, very effective, even though they had a pretty difficult fight by their standards. They were being chased all over the place for quite a lot of the battle. Did any unit get below 100 kills? A couple did. Harland and Guard, both units of Harland and Guard, the High Elven Ballista as well, but that was mainly engaged in an artillery duel with Isengard, which you never really want, and FORLINDON Pikemen. But the rest getting from between 100 to 300 kills, other than, of course, the Wardens of Elos Tyrion. So very much a standard Elven performance on the defence, getting a lot of kills all around with a few standouts, including Rangers. So yeah, big thank you to Lango yet again for sending this replay to me, because it was very good, and I hope a lot of you enjoyed it as well, because obviously it's a nice Elven settlement with an example of what you can expect from 0.97. So hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which I have been a little bit off colour recently, a little bit ill, but I have still been able to record these fights, but hopefully that can continue, because I want to be able to keep up the pace and get through all of my 0.96 content before 0.97 comes out, because I don't want to leave anything that people have sent me out if I can help it. We shall see. As for the future, there is obviously the Tug of War event coming soon. If any of you are on the official Discord, you'll know about the official Tug of War event, which is going on just after the release of 0.97, and I will be taking part in that. There may also be a few streams going on, which I might be a part of. I can't actually stream myself because I don't think my internet would be up to the task, but I might be able to get in on some other streams alongside a couple of other people, but we shall see. Again, it's with 0.97 getting closer, it does pay to just mention these things, but obviously there is still over a week before this will actually be a thing. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me, whatever is next.